Hey, if you're just starting to mix vocals, there's a few things that I wish somebody would have told me early on. They're not rules, they're not mistakes, just guidance that would have saved me a lot of time. And if you're new here, my name is Dax, and I make these videos to share what I've learned about mixing and what I'm still figuring out, with the hopes that it can help you along your mixing journey as well. So if that resonates with you, stick around. And for this video, I could name 100 things, but I'm gonna narrow it down to 5 key points that I think is gonna help you if you're just beginning, and this may not be knowledge that you've come across yet. It's gonna significantly help you when you try these tips out. So let's go ahead and start with number 1, and that's gonna be use multiple compressors and each one doing a specific job. So what I used to do was use one compressor when I was mixing my vocals. And though that could help for some vocals, for me, I always found that I had to compress too much to try to control the wild dynamics that I often experience with my vocals. And now, as I mix other people's vocals, I find that a lot of times, depending on the microphone, the mic technique, a lot of these vocals are very dynamic, meaning that there's a lot of variation between the higher parts of the vocal and the lower parts of the vocal. And the goal is to try to bring them together, closer together, to control those dynamics so that the vocal can sit on top of the beat or the mix without getting lost. Because sometimes you have these lower phrases and these higher phrases, and the higher phrases are a little bit too loud, the lower phrases get a little bit too lost. So it's hard to know where to position your vocal. So compression is gonna help control that and do some other things. But I found that using 2 compressors, this is called serial compression, one into the other, is going to help give us a much more controlled vocal. What I used to do was use one compressor in hopes that I could smash the vocal enough to control it, because my vocals would be kind of very dynamic. And when you put the vocal in a mix, those high parts, depending on where you're setting the balance, could be a little too loud at times, and the low parts tend to make the vocal get a little bit too quiet, and then the music tends to become a little bit too prominent over the vocal. So it's really hard to find a perfect balance and spot for a vocal when you're not able to control those dynamics. And with one compressor, it may do the job, but then it's more than likely going to sound a little too over compressed, because you would need a lot more compression, the compressor doing a lot more work to control that vocal. So when you split the workload between 2 compressors, you get a much more natural result. But here's the key. The first compressor is doing a specific job, and the second compressor is doing another job. The first one would be more so controlling the peaks. This is usually in the likes of a FET compressor, which is a very fast compressor. It's a grabby compressor, meaning it's going to take those initial spikes, especially the loud ones, and kind of bring them down a lot quicker than another compressor could. So it's going to be very good at taming the transients of the vocal. And then that would feed into a slower compressor, which is more of a musical compressor. So it's not going to be quite as fast as the first one, but it's going to be a little bit more musical, how it kind of goes along with the main energy of the vocal, more than just a sharp, pokey, very quick transient. And that's going to give you a vocal that really stands at attention and kind of gets it to sit on top of the beat. Number 2 is avoid over EQing the mid-range to maintain vocal energy. So what I used to do was really kind of try to seek and destroy all the resonant frequencies that would exist in a vocal, whether it was recorded great or bad. I always felt like there was resonances that needed to be tamed. And I usually did it a lot more extreme than I should have. But the area to me that was the most annoying was anywhere between 1K and 5 or 6K, and still is, don't get me wrong. But what I used to do was just try to find all the frequencies, and whether I was doing it with an EQ that had like an infinite amount of EQ points or nodes that I could do that with, or now, you can use any kind of resonance suppression tool like Soothe or the Curves Equator from Waves, anything like that can kind of dig in to that area and control and suppress resonances, but sometimes take it way too far. So I used to remove like all the energy out of the mid-range, but that's the area that also tends to cut through the mix very well. There's a lot going on in that area. So if you remove too much from the vocal, now you have the piano, guitar, synths, whatever it is that has a lot of energy and harmonics in that range. Now the vocal is going to take a back seat. So you want enough energy there to make it cut through the dense mix over those instruments that are sharing and occupying the same frequency range. But I used to not really consider that. And for me, the result was this very scooped out sounding vocal. And it was still very difficult to get the mids and the upper mids controlled, but I would have this scooped vocal where the low mids, though I still tried to do the same thing with the low mids. They would be kind of present, and then the mid range would be scooped, and then the top end would be super bright. And it just wasn't a very forward, warm, pleasing sound. So avoid too much suppression, resonance suppression, and EQing there, because what you're going to end up doing is boosting everything, and everything is going to sound bad. So you're going to start cutting away and digging away at all this stuff that really doesn't sound bad. So my advice now, and what I implement now, is if I know there's a certain frequency that's going to be a problem because it normally is, or if I hear that frequency, then I'm going to go and dig into that and suppress it and reduce it a couple dB, 3 dB, depending on, how bad it is. But I'm not digging the way that I did, only what's necessary. So avoid doing that just because you think that everything that exists in that range is bad. Number 3 is be cautious about overprocessing, especially with poorly recorded vocals. So when you have a vocal that wasn't recorded well, or it wasn't recorded on a good mic, or the acoustics are bad, it's going to pick up a lot of stuff that you're not going to like. But sometimes when you hear the raw vocal before you start adding all this compression, it doesn't sound as bad. Like when you start adding too much compression, too much EQ, and then you bypass and A/B the two, the raw to the process vocal, it's like, wow, this doesn't sound good. I watched these tutorials and I've seen people processing the vocal in this way, and it sounds worse than my raw vocal, because I think that there's a lot of stuff in a bad vocal recording that will start to come out a lot more, because when you compress something, you're not only controlling those peaks when you raise the output gain, because when you control the peaks, it kind of brings the volume down. So now you need to compensate and bring the volume back up. That's what output gain is doing. You're bringing up all of that low level information. So now you're starting to hear maybe more noise, more scratchiness, more distortion, all of that unfavorable characteristic in a bad vocal recording. It's sounding less pleasing as you add more processing. So sometimes you just have to bow out or choose your battle, and don't let stress win that battle. Trust me. Realize that this vocal can only go so far. Do your best and just move on. Number 4 is subtract frequencies that mask the top end instead of boosting the highs. So I know that it's very tempting to want to just boost the high end of a vocal to make it sound bright, open, and clear. But there's a better way to bring out the clarity in a vocal, especially if it's not recorded well or it just doesn't sound that good. And that's actually dealing with the problem of masking. So what happens often in a vocal that's recorded in a small, closet, confined space, or microphone shield, chaotic eyeball, whatever goes around a microphone, you get this kind of low, mid, and boxy buildup, which tends to really muffle the sound. So that muffled sound tends to mask, those frequencies are a lot more dominant, tends to mask the mid-range and the high end. So sometimes all you have to do to get more clarity out of a vocal is reduce the boxiness, reduce the boominess, subtract a little 250, 300, 500 hertz. Get rid of that couple decibels, and you'll see that now the vocal is just going to start to pop out and become a little bit more clear, or a lot more clear depending on how much you need to remove. And I like to boost EQ on a vocal. Sometimes I like to use saturation and other things that could help to enhance the high end by adding harmonics. But what I would normally do first is subtract, because I know that there's going to be some frequencies that are masking those other frequencies that I want to hear more of. And number 5 is use parallel compression. If you're not familiar with parallel compression or anything parallel, all it is, you're creating a send on that vocal track and sending it to an aux. And on that aux, you're going to insert a compressor. So now you have a copy of the vocal. It's playing on the main track and it's playing on that aux track, 2 places. And essentially what you're doing is you're more heavily compressing on the aux track. There's a couple different ways that you could achieve a certain sound out of this parallel chain, but just know that we're going to smash the vocal more than we do on the original track. So you might want to get 10, 12, or more decibels of gain reduction here, because what we're going to do is blend this into taste, but starting all the way down and blending it in until the vocal starts to become fuller and lift more aggressive, more energy. And that's the goal of parallel compression. So you're retaining the original dynamics of the vocal And on the parallel channel, you're smashing them to oblivion and then blending that in to create a little bit of a bigger sound and a more controlled sound. This is where you don't have to compress as much on the main vocal channel. You can actually, just control it a bit and then do most of your heavy compression on the aux track and just blend that to taste. And you're going to find that that's going to make that vocal stand even more at attention and sit on top of the beat. So I hope this information helped you. If you like this video, hit that like button. And if you want to grow with me and learn more from me about mixing, then consider subscribing to the channel. I'd greatly appreciate that. And if you've used any of these techniques before, or if any of this information helped you and you're going to try them out, leave a comment below and let me know. And until the next video, may God bless you. Peace.